and welcome to Dark Hour Paranormal. I am your host, Michael Roser, and tonight, folks, we are diving into the world of clairvoyance, psychic activity. Possibly we'll discuss a bit of remote viewing, because honestly, I think all of these are essentially intertwined, and this is what we've found through various avenues of research. Tonight, folks, I have a very special treat for you. My guest is Robert Lindsy Milne, and I hope I said his last name right. He said it recently, but I just hope I got it right. Listen, that being said, Robert has an extensive repertoire of experience when it comes to clairvoyance, and there's a very specific reason that I titled tonight's show exactly what I did. And the overarching reason is because when we talk about clairvoyance, when we talk about psychic healing and activity with the sixth sense and so forth, premonition, all this sort of fits into the same category. And yet, if you're not having a very personal experience, it is often difficult to find something substantial in way of evidence. Now, again, coming back to the title of the show tonight, I'm curious, for those who have worked within the public service arena, what their validity has become as a result of that trust, of that integration into, let's say, a more common job, but they have a very uncommon task as the employee or the position that they hold. Robert has worked with the police on many occasions, I understand, as well as the Canadian Secret Service. And for him or anyone to garner that type of trust, there has to be something to the work that they have. So my question overall tonight is, in working with the public service in this respect, does it validate the abilities that are put forth? Because again, you're hired, you're maybe even on a payroll. Some people aren't. You know, we have people that go into hospitals and work with Reiki, and they do this on a regular basis. They're expected to be there. They're obviously desired for that reason. But there are others who are put on a payroll, and again, this transmutes into an actual paying job. So again, where's the validity in that respect? Now, before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about Robert and what he's done. Now, first and foremost, the book, The Perfect Predator, which Cashew Gesundheit has very graciously dropped the link into. You can check this out. Robert has been featured and quoted no less than 24 times in this novel, and I certainly recommend that you go out and check it. He has a fantastic podcast that he's working on and building every single time that he's on. It's called My Side of the Crystal Ball. And of course, you can find a link for that underneath in the description below. And of course, there are some other peripheral contacts you may get into on that sense. In the meantime, let me read you a little something about Robert here. Robert is a psychic-intuitive counselor, teacher, healer, and life coach. He's recognized across the continent as one of the most insightful psychic-intuitive counselors of his time. At a very young age, he realized his psychic gifts and started his first job working as a psychic intuitive doing readings at the Cozy Tea Room in Toronto. Robert has traveled the world giving insight with his psychic intuitive sessions to tens of thousands of people and has become recognized across the continent as one of the most insightful counselors of this time. Robert has also worked with the police and Canadian Secret Service, helping to gather intel and working on missing persons cases. Currently, Robert is hosting his podcast, My Side of the Crystal Ball. You can find the show on all popular platforms, including iHeartRadio. Oh, by the way, he's also an award-winning baker. So, if you're looking for anything stemming from what might happen to you in the future to a fantastic loaf of bread, Robert is the guy to go and check out. Well, listen, without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you this very interesting individual, Robert Lindsy Milne. How you doing, Robert?
You. I'm doing great. I'm listening to what you're saying in the introduction. Are you sure you're reading the right page? This is I get blown away by the things that you said. I've done them all, but it's astonishing when I hear them.
Well, as long as they're true, we're on the same page. Yeah.
I assure you they are. It's just astonishing hearing it being said. I've been a professional psychic for 57 years. And I started working at the Cozy Tea Room. I was 15 and a half, and I was homeless on the street in Toronto. and I was surviving by my instincts, intuition, psychic abilities. You know, even before that, even as a child, I was doing psychic things. So I survived on the street using my psychic abilities, and I did readings too. But my intuition was to keep me safe. And I heard on the street that if you worked at the Cozy Tea Room in Toronto doing tea leaf readings and card readings, and I had never done a tea leaf reading or a card reading in my life, but I heard that if you worked there and you did that, at the end of the shift, you would, well, first you'd get a sandwich and a cup of tea and some cookies, and then you'd get paid at the end of the shift. And if you worked at night, you got a hot dinner and a cup of tea and cookies, and you got paid.
Not
and
bad.
I applied. I applied that day. It was January 17th, and I applied that day. And how I got the job was I did a reading for the owner. And as I said, I'd never done a tea leaf reading. So I just picked the cup in my hands, looked in it, and then looked at Mrs. Cox and said whatever I would have said if I were doing a regular reading. I didn't even look in the teacup. I just pretended I did. And then when it was time to put the cards on the table, as it were, I had no idea what they meant. But what I would do is, or what I did was I incorporated what I was sensing and feeling from her, and I just incorporated the cards in what I was saying. I'd point to the Seven of Hearts and then talk about something, and I had no idea what the Seven of Hearts meant. And I wasn't interested. What I needed to do was the reading, and I got hired that day. And I worked at the Cozy Tea Room for almost 6 years. And I worked there 5 and 6 days a week, and sometimes 7. And during that time, I some days I'd see 40 people. Some days I would see 20. And it would be like that every day. And I lived that for 6 years. It was an amazing experience.
That's quite the tenure.
Yes. Now, during that time, I also did other things, but I always went back to the tea room. So I would do an unusual job for a short time and then go back to the tea room. But all the while, I would still be doing psychic readings, even if I wasn't at the tea room. And anyway, that's how I got off the street.
Well, let me ask you before you go forward here. Obviously, you've mentioned that at that time you're homeless, you were on the streets, and you were using certain intuitions to survive. And I understand, knowing many people who have been in the same situation, that your instincts somewhat become honed. Just being out in that survival arena. Do you feel that being in that type of unstable arena kind of helped you to, or propelled you into understanding your own sensitivities to this? Yes.
Without question. And it was also a training program, a training period for me on the streets. And when I was on the streets, I never stole anything. I never robbed anybody. I never did anything illegal. And what I would do was use my instincts to find a place to sleep or get food or work for food. When I was in trouble, and children on the street would get in trouble, I would be presented with the option of solving the problem using my psychic ability or intuition, or use an illegal or do an immoral act. And almost every time I chose to do solve the problem by my intuition, there was no right or wrong answer. What happened though is where my life went depended upon the decisions that I made. There was no right or wrong decision, but whatever decision I made directed my life.
That's really curious, because I think there are a lot of people that have some access to these experiences. There's certainly nothing controlled there. They sort of fly by night. And we chalk it up to a very dirty word that's loaded and impregnated, and that's coincidence. I've spoken about this many times, and I think as we move forward and understand this phenomenon at large, we're going
Can
to
I just ask you one question here? When
Please.
you say coincidence, could you give me an example?
Well, what you and I might call
Yep.
synchronicity. A lot of people who don't know what, or are not observing synchronicity in way of the connection that you and I might call it coincidence because they feel it's outside of themselves. You understand?
Okay. When I'm doing psychic readings, I'm very much inside myself. I'm very much aware of what's going on. The reason I ask that is what coincidence means. There are only so many types of things that can happen in the world. There are a lot of variations, but there's only so many types of things that can occur. So they're bound to be repeats of certain experiences. And when you meet somebody and when you're open, there'll be room for lots of coincidences or having things in common, or extreme opposite too, by the way.
Okay, so what is the difference in your interpretation of coincidence versus synchronicity? Is there a difference, or are they essentially the same thing?
I think it's semantic, yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing, I don't worry very much about putting a label on what I do. I simply do readings now. Some people say that I channel. I don't know if I do. Some people say that I'm a remote viewer. And back in the late 1970s, I was mid 70s. I was the first Canadian psychic to start touring the country and appearing on radio and TV shows. And the type of work, well, I'm 73, so it was a while ago.
Did you ever run across Uri Geller out of curiosity? I know he was very active around that time as well.
I never met him personally.
Okay, just curious.
Curious. I was more focused on me, but I was never around him. I was always interested in performing and doing readings, and so when people would call in, do the talk shows, what I want people to do is tell me your first name, where you're calling from, think of a question, but don't ask it. And so, John calls from Milwaukee. Oh, thanks a lot, John. And then I would say the first thing that came into my mind. And it would often be, okay, so John, you're at home right now. You're holding the phone with your left hand. This is back in the days when the phones were in the wall, right?
Oh, I remember those days.
Holding the phone with your left hand, put your hand over the table that you're sitting at, move it to the right. Is that where I got burned last night? Now I was doing that in the mid 70s. Some people call that being remote viewing. I call it being psychic. I didn't have a label for it. I just simply did it, and I did it because it was I could do it at the time, and I just simply kept practicing doing things like that.
Now, I certainly respect your position to take, where you're saying I don't want to label certain things that I do, and I certainly, in many respects, stand on that side of the fence along with you. I have found as we go on, because we're talking about a field that is essentially very nebulous or just right-brained. I mean, this is sort of an intangible thing, but yet experiential. For people to understand, how the brain compartmentalizes, as you know. So for them to understand and kind of feel like this is more tangible, I understand that the labels are sort of necessary. But again, it's a matter of language, and you did say it right, semantics, back and forth. But again, at the end of the day, we're just all looking to understand this and have more clarity. Let me take you into.
Can I just respond to that?
Yes, please.
I used to teach a one-day seminar. And in that seminar, I guaranteed, well, actually everything I do, I guaranteed in that seminar that anyone that sits in it will be able to do a psychic reading for a stranger that day. If not, I give you back your money. No questions asked. 100%. That was the way it is. Now, I had groups as big as 310 and all the way down to 20. And over my career, and I did it off and on for about 20 years. And over my career, I gave back money twice. It was requested back. So what I start off with is I explain what being psychic is. And one of the things that I when I get people to start to do the exercises in the room, and by the way, within about an hour and a half, a group of strangers, I have them face each other, and they're actually doing psychic stuff.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, or you get your money back. That's just the way it is. So one of the things that I tell people is become aware of what's obvious. So when you're sitting with somebody, become aware of what's obvious. Look at them. Become aware of what they're like. Feel that. Now, as you become aware of what's obvious, more becomes obvious about that person or that situation. And when more becomes obvious, then more becomes obvious again.
Okay.
And as your mind starts to open up and more becomes obvious, you get to a point that what you're looking at and seeing yourself seems obvious to you, but it's not obvious to others. and that's the first step. So become aware of what's obvious. And there was one time, I think it was in Winnipeg or something, and it might have been minus 35 Celsius. Anyway, I was doing one of those phone-in shows, and I just forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, so I used to always get a recording of the shows that I do. I would listen to the recordings of the shows and the calls. So I was talking with this guy, gives John from so and so, and I say whatever comes off the top of my head, and as I'm saying it, I'm thinking to myself, this is so bloody obvious, Robert. You're going to get caught. Somebody's going to say, listen, you're just faking it. And that's what I was thinking when I was saying the words. And I continued on. So when I was listening to the air check that night, because I wanted to hear what I was saying and if I was going to be in trouble or not, I listened and I remembered the state of mind I was in when I was seeing it. It was different than hearing it, but I remember. And what I realized is what I was saying back that time was not obvious at all. It just was obvious for me in the moment. So become aware of what's obvious, and then more will become obvious. Now, you can call it anything you want, but that's how you do it.
I like that. And there are very few people out there that can sort of put a line in front of us and say, hey, follow this, and you may get to a linear end. And that's something, again, I think our logical mind needs. Now, let me ask you this. It seems that within our human experience, and this might kind of refer to what I had mentioned in way of your experience, okay, strife can either destroy us or make us stronger. Given the latter outcome, is it necessary to have such extreme challenges in life to become aware of certain innate abilities?
Yes. Most people that I've met that do this work, even from the old days, and sometimes especially from the old days, just about everybody I've ever met that does this kind of work has had experienced some type of trauma, upset, horrible times. People that do this work, like I sometimes say, angels and empaths don't come down from heaven. We fight our way out of hell. So that we don't start at the top and come down. We start at the bottom and work up. And in order to get there, in order to understand something, you have to know what it is. You have to have an experience. And often we learn to protect ourselves from abusive situations by using those instincts. And it happens at a young age. But
Absolutely.
Almost everybody has that, yeah.
Well, I've certainly noticed that as well, myself included. It seems that, we've always had to go through something. I remember being in a Baptist church many years ago.
Sure.
I wasn't part of the congregation. I was actually there running sound. But I remember a woman getting on stage, just a regular participant, and her overall message was that we have to go through something to get to where we want to go. And I thought that was powerful, as elementary as that may seem. And I always wondered if perhaps we are cultivating what we have in way of these abilities out of that tumult that obviously we experience. Now, in a collective sense. Yep.
Okay, can I just
you're
saying stuff that I just want to jump in.
No,
I don't want to
jump in, my friend. It's warm in here.
Karma is something very, very simple. What you do one way, you'll do equally the opposite. What goes around comes around. And the purpose of our life is to experience. That's it.
Yes,
right?
I agree.
Experience all things on all levels.
Yep.
And in order to understand all things on all levels, we'll have to have many incarnations. But what we do one way, we must do equally the opposite. So as good as we are, as bad as we are, we have to experience both sides. And that's how we understand things.
If the soul is benign in respect to preference when it comes to experience, as I understand, because it wants to experience everything regardless of what we think when we get down here, so to speak, right? That's sound. Absolutely sound.
And just that what you do one way, you have to do the other. That's karma. It's the way it is.
There's that expression of the duality encased in this experience, and the right, the left. There's always that duality, and I find that very interesting, to say the least, because I think at some point we must transcend duality. I mean, if it's in the geometric makeup of this particular reality, there are other realities that have different constructs. You know what I mean? So it might not be something that we can research to the fullest today, but we can certainly hypothesize and theorize as we go forward. Collectively, do you see human beings developing psychic awareness as time goes on intrinsically, or will this be something we need to choose to cultivate regardless of how many lives we live?
Almost everyone, and I say almost, but not 100%, almost everyone has psychic ability. And our species, the type of being that we are, mammals, almost all mammals are intuitive, are psychic, or have that kind of awareness. We happen to have it a little bit better, and it's that intuition, that psychic ability, got us out of the caves instead of in the belly of a brontosaur or a dinosaur or something. So being psychic is a normal phenomenon that we all have. And no, almost all. So if you think of put everybody on the planet on a bell-shaped curve, there's one person at one end of the bell-shaped curve that has zero psychic ability. And then there's another person at the other end that has 100% psychic ability or awareness. And then the rest of us fit somewhere in between on that curve. So just about all of us have that intuition. And it's very simple. Have you ever been sitting somewhere and you just kind of look up and someone's been just looking at you and then you look away? Have you ever had that kind of experience before?
I know, I certainly have.
Okay, and almost everybody does. Or have you ever been thinking about somebody you haven't connected with for whatever, and then all of a sudden you bump into them or whatever? That is being psychic. That's the first thing. So just about everybody can do that. Now, if you want to start saying, oh, well, I'm going to take that and channel it, you're going to spend the next 10 years thinking about how to do it rather than just doing it. And so, right. So you can put lots of names on it if you want, or you can do it. And that's where I come from. So anyway, that's what.
Well, you mentioned that, you don't think 100% of the people out there have the capability to do this. Let me ask you this question.
Almost everyone can, yeah.
In your interpretation, why is it that some of us have a proclivity towards something like this? Is it because we cultivated it in another existence, or did we just come into it within our DNA? I mean, we're talking about cellular memory. Why do some people have an easier time reaching that psychic awareness while others may walk through their entire life without any knowledge of it whatsoever?
I can't speak for anyone else except for me. I'm psychic. I'm pretty good psychic. I've done more than 100,000 psychic connections in my lifetime. I haven't seen it all, but seen a lot. My focus is just giving service and doing readings, and I'm not that aware. No, my focus is doing readings, giving service. That's what I do. It's how I survived, and so I took that skill and survived by it. But I also have a rather serious perceptive issue. I didn't learn to read like in a book or write until I was in my late teens. And I have a document now with me that says that I am functionally illiterate. So I have issues with reading and writing. I have issues with numbers. So my psychic ability or my awareness expanded, and that's how I survived too.
Okay, very curious. Yep, no, absolutely. There are many paths that all reach a very similar end.
That's right.
It's a matter of the experience, right?
That's right.
It often seems the intuitive and intellectual sides of ourselves have difficulty connecting. Do you see a time in our immediate future where there may be a more harmonious integration of the left and right brain perception when it comes to, talking about psychic activity?
Could you say that again, please?
I'd be more than happy to. Let me rephrase that. So with the left brain perception, it's logical, right? Intellectual.
Yes, I understand
right brain
that
perception,
part.
Intuitive.
Right.
Now, we seem to be coming head together, okay? We have both of these perceptions of life, and one says, no, I'm right, no, I'm right. Do you see at any point in our immediate future where we might actually merge the right and the left brain, so we might see the physical evidence for what we experience, in the right brain sense and so forth?
Okay. We like I've never thought about this, and I've never been asked a question like this. That's why I asked you to repeat it. And actually, I was stalling.
But we're here doing, my friend.
Right.
It's okay.
So all right. So I'm just thinking about it. First of all, nobody.
Easy questions, right?
Or almost nobody does everything or can do everything. Not everybody understands what they're doing. Not everybody's going to be 6 feet tall, and not everybody is going to be lean and trim. So we're all going to be who we are, and we will evolve. Whether because on this planet, we're here to learn, to experience. So on this planet, in an existence, maybe you'll be overbalanced on the right side, and then in another existence, you'll be overbalanced on the left, and then in another existence, you're balanced, and then in any other possibility. So what you were saying is a really wonderful way to think, but there's always going to be an opposition. There's always going to be this way and that way, and there's always going to be people that will see things from different points of view. And that's because we all see things from different points of view.
Yeah, it's not an easy question, and most of these lie in the world of conjecture or stark opinion based on experience. But these are things that I'd like to raise up so that we're thinking about them. And as we get deeper into a certain concept, and everybody that's out there listening, is coming along with this same mentality. So it's really interesting to visit, I think, some of these angles as we go forward here. Now, I do have a very curious question for you that I have had certain answers for, and I certainly have my own theories about, but I'd like to hear what your thoughts are. If everything is subject to change based on decisions that we make moving forward, how does the clairvoyant view the most likely timeline one may traverse given their prior choices versus them perhaps making a more rash decision later on that detours from the outcome of what you may see?
There are few things that are destined in people's lives, and destiny cannot be seen, because if destiny could be seen, it could be changed. And
so what is destiny, though? If I may ask you, what is that exactly?
Destiny is what is in a person's existence that they're going to experience.
So that's their plan. That's what they can.
That's their plan.
Gotcha.
And so that's okay. That's a variation of, and that is what I meant by that. Okay, so destiny cannot be seen. Oh, I'll give you an example. After this, the Olympics, Winter Olympics in Calgary in the 80s, the day after it ended, or 2 days after it ended, a woman came to me for a reading. It was in Toronto, and I did this really fantastic reading for her. It was really wonderful, and her life was bright, and things were going to be great for her. She was a producer of the sporting events for CTV for the Olympics. And after I did her reading, she got on her bike and rode home. And the next day, the next night on the news, I was listening to the national, broadcaster saying, doing this obituary. And it was a picture of the young woman that I had done a reading for the day before. And she got hit by, we have street cars. You can call them trolley cars too here in Toronto.
Sure.
Now they're those, the length of a football field. But anyway, we have those. And she got hit by a streetcar while she was riding her bike home. And I didn't see it. I missed it. Now I'll never forget it. And I walked the floors at night, thinking, if you're so bloody good, how could you have missed something like that? What's the matter with you? Yelled at myself in the mirror, spit in the mirror, I just couldn't understand. And then it just came to me, wait, there are some things that are meant to be, and it's destiny. And if you can see it, you can change it. And when you can see something happening, you can decide to accept it or not. So unless it's destiny, you don't see it. So when I do readings, often I see the person's life from conception to the ending, the completion of their life. And now I don't see the actions. I just see where the timeline or the energy line is, right?
Sure.
And to the end. And when I am doing readings, I'm constantly going forward and backward in time. So it is my moral obligation, if I see something bad for somebody, it is my moral obligation to tell them. And because if I see it, they can change it. And that's one of the lessons I learned by that young woman, and a couple of hundred other ones too. When you can see it, you can change it. So it's my obligation, moral, to tell somebody what I see that's negative. But there's another moral obligation that I have as well, and that's not to scare the hell out of the person.
Certainly.
So what I do, because I move forward and backward in time several times in people's readings, what I do is I'll go to, let's say the person I'm doing a reading for is 40. I'll go forward in time to when they're 80. And I will describe to them the wonderful result of the terrible thing that I'm going to tell them that they're going to go through.
Okay,
but
I see
what
what
I
you're doing.
talk about is the really positive event. That's the direct opposite. And then I talk a little bit, and then I come, back to where we are in the present, and then I just drop a little, like a little leaf, as it were, and then change the subject, talk about the good thing. And sometimes I can draw it out for 35, 40 minutes where I'm going backward and forward, just preparing that person, but other things too in the reading. And then by the time I tell them what's going to happen, they're already ready for it.
Softened up for it.
And they're not afraid, because that's one of the ways that I do it. Other ways when I'm doing readings, because I move forward and backward in time in how I see things. And if someone is going through a crisis, and that often happens in my work, again, what I do is I look forward into the future to a time at an old age, and then I look back through that person's eyes when they're 80 to where they are now, and I explain to them now how they feel about the way they solved the problem they're going through when they're 80. And the healing is just so beautiful to watch. I get choked up saying it. And that's part of how I do things. And okay, so I'll stop.
No, it's, if you have something to say, that's fine.
So when I'm doing readings now, this didn't happen at the Cozy Tea Room when I was 15. This is a result of 57 and a half years of being dedicated and committed and working at my craft. It's not, and it's been evolved over time. So I move forward and backward in time, and I see clear events that are very clear that happened previously, and events that are going to happen or that are happening now, and I'm constantly moving back. Now, I also, when I do readings, I ask people not to interrupt me, and let the information come out, and at the end there'll be a question period. So when I'm doing and get into the connection now, what I'm saying isn't necessarily what I'm thinking, because what I'm saying has already been processed, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to say. But I also could be thinking about what I said 10 minutes ago. And again, at the same time, all happening, I'll be thinking about what I'm going to be doing later on that day. And it's all happening. It's like TV screens on the wall, and they're all playing at the same time. And I'm going backward and forward. So if I get interrupted, what happens is I lose the connection.
I've been to many readings where the clairvoyant had asked me not to interrupt and ask questions for that flow of consciousness. And a lot of times it had to do with the channeling of that energy. And I think, in certain respects, that's exactly what you're doing in a certain respect. Again, avoiding certain labels, but watching the activity at least. Very curious, though. And I really take to heart what you're saying about kind of bringing somebody into a place of understanding and comfort before you lay on something that they may have to go through later on in life, or even more immediately, but you prepare them. And I think that's so important to relinquish certain fear when it comes to this, because many people believe that the future cannot be changed in any way, shape, or form. We're starting to soften up as a species, understanding this concept as we go. But by and large, people are still feeling that, life is out of their control. They don't have a certain manifestation property, which we intrinsically do. But again, that's another thing that we are learning, a large lesson. Before I go forward, I need to address
Yes.
something very quickly.
Okay.
Folks that were here last night on last night's show, I did show this object, okay? This piece here. And I did mention that I would reveal what this special piece is at the end of the show, and I forgot. So I apologize. I will tell you at the end of this show what this is. Again, just giving you the clue that, yes, it did come from Montauk. It is from Camp Hero. So let your imagination fly. Now, with that being said, Robert, I'm going to throw a question out there to you that is, sort of off the board in respect to what we were talking about. But you did mention remote viewing, so I'm curious about this. And again, I'm not asking you to exert any of your services in this question, but you can kind of dance about it as you like. If I were to ask you to remote view something such as Camp Hero in Montauk, where alleged black projects have been rife within the past 70 years. Is that something you would be able to do? I mean, knowing that the underground facilities are quite vast and that they may have some type of etheric resistance waiting for you on that level.
My focus is more giving service to people in front of me.
Okay.
Somebody that's in trouble. And I often say, I'm not smart enough to be able to solve world hunger. I'm not smart enough to stop all wars or things like that. But what I can do is take care of the hurt person in front of me. And I'm really good at that.
Start with one.
And I'm really good with that. And that's where I'm focused. And as I said, I'm not that bright to be able to understand all those complexities. But I do understand how people think, and I do understand how people feel, and I do understand how and why people behave the way they behave. And that's one of my things that I focus on.
Excellent answer. Let's bring it back into your domain a little bit here. Now, I usually don't use bullet point questions that are provided within the press kit unless there's something that sort of jumps out at me. And there was one question that was provided that sort of gave me a bit of a stare. And that is, can you tell us about how you helped a coma patient and helped cure a very rare disease? I assume, utilizing the abilities that you possess.
Yes. So I just want to say that I'm not the star of the show. And I played a role, but there were other bigger stars as well. Basically, what happened is I have a client, and I can tell you her name because she wrote the book, and her name is Stephanie Strathdy, Dr. Stephanie Strathdy, and her husband Thomas Patterson, Dr. Thomas Patterson, and they're both professors, and they're both associate deans of their departments, and they're both very well-known researchers. Tom and Stephanie go away on a dream vacation, and they're in Egypt. The year before, I did a reading for Tom, and I warned him. And by the way, I used the same technique with Tom. Tom had blown up to a really big, high weight. And I said to Tom, in 2 years from now, you're going to be more than 100 pounds lighter than what you are. And you're not, and I talked about that. And then I mentioned that he could get sick. And then I talked about being 100 pounds lighter. And then I talked about with him getting sick, and I told him where the area would be. And I said, and you're going to get so sick that you can't get sicker without dying. And I said that to him. And then I said, but you will live and you'll lose more than 100 pounds. And I said, Tom, I think that this is a destiny thing if you want. The purpose here is to lose 100 pounds. And the way I'm seeing it is what I say to you about getting sick. It scares the hell out of you. You pay attention to your diet and lose 100 pounds and not get sick, or get sick and lose 100 pounds. And I said, it's up to you. You can do it the easy way or the hard way. Anyway, he chose to do it the hard way, and he got sick when they were in Egypt. And he caught the most potent superbug on the planet. And it was 100% antibiotic resistant. And that meant when you get it, you die.
Yeah.
Stephanie is a renowned epidemiologist. That's her field. And when her husband Tom was in a coma in isolation, then he got out. They went to Germany for treatment, and she contacted me. I'd been her psychic for years, and I told her that Tom would live, and I told her that she could find the cure. And Stephanie set out to find the cure for her husband dying of the disease, the incurable disease, and he was in a coma, and she only had time, and she had to start from scratch. And I was her confidant and a support with her every day. And I had a conscious mental link with Tom. And I created that mental link, and I knew what he was going through 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when he was in the coma. And I knew when his vital signs changed. I knew when he was okay. I knew when he was sick. I knew when he was in trouble. And I lived and breathed that energy for close to a year. At the same time, I was a support with Stephanie, and every day I gave her a report as to what I was seeing and sensing with Tom while he was in the coma. At the same time, Stephanie was reaching out around the world, and she created a group of people. Everyone scientists except for the psychic care. So scientists around the world, some of the most brilliant minds, all got together in that moment and looked for the cure together. And it was narrowed down to 3. And with Stephanie, I had that meeting with her, and I was also her psychic and her support through the time. She presented, well, with everybody, all her experts, though, she presented to me that she found 3 possible ways to go. And with Tom dying in a coma, they could only choose one. So she said, I'm going to run these by you. And I said, okay. And she says, the first one is called phages. And I said, that's the one. And she said, well, let me tell you about it. And I said, well, that's the one. And she said, just let me tell you about it. And I said, okay. And she told me about it. And I said, that's the one. Then she said, I'm going to tell you about the second one. And she did. And I said, the first one. And then she told me about the third one. We still went through the same crap as well. And I said, the first one. And she said, why? And I said, because it's like a little Pac-Man. And the Pac-Man will attack the superbug, eat it, kill it, and eat it. That's what's going to happen. And now she had experts, and around the world got together, collaborated. But what her final choice was, when I said little Pac-Man, is what made her do that final choice and choose phages. Phages is harvest from sewer water, and it's excrement. And in the 1920s and 30s, there were experiments done in Russia where people that had lower organ infections, bowel and they were treated with stool and fresh stool, and that was injected in them. And the concept was the good bacteria kills the bad bacteria.
So strengthening of the immune system based on introduction of something more toxic.
That's right. A feces, right?
Okay.
A fresh turd, and then at the end of the 30s, penicillin was invented. So when people had these illnesses, instead of getting a turd, they had the choice of a pill. Everybody chose the pill. So the research stopped. And now when the superbugs, as they started forming, research started occurring in this area for phages. Tom was the first human that it was injected. Now they just didn't take a raw turd and stick it in his arm, right?
Right.
What that didn't happen. It was sanitized, and they altered the DNA and stuff like that. And then he was injected. So Tom had been in this coma for 8 months. He was hours away from dying.
Mm-hmm.
And finally he was injected with the phages. And at first, I wasn't there because this one happened in California. I was in Toronto. I knew something happened to Tom because his energy got stronger. And then a little while later, they injected him again, and his vital signs got stronger and stronger. So they figured, well, we didn't kill him. Let's give him another hit.
Let's do it again.
And yeah, that's right. And they repeated that several times throughout the night. And the next morning, Stephanie came to the hospital to see Tom. And when she got there, he opened his eyes and he looked at her straight in the eyes, and he came out of the coma. And then it was only for a short time. Then he closed his eyes again and fell asleep and never went into a coma again.
Unbelievable that you were an instrument in that healing and production of no, that's not the word I'm looking for, return of energy for this individual. If we could all have such insight, I think obviously we'd have a much different world here. Now we are getting a little close. Excuse me, hair in my mouth. We are getting close to the end of the show.
I don't have quite as long a beard, but I understand what it's like.
Yeah, it can be a challenge, but it still fits the face, keeps it symmetrical. We didn't really get to touch too much on the police work, but I do have a couple questions that I can throw at you, at least to bring this into light for what I wanted to ask you. Curiously, what does one's resume look like when applying for a position as a psychic in a public service such as the police department?
I never applied.
They seek you out.
They came to me. So we're back in the 1970s. And in those days, they didn't have networks. If you were going to be on a radio station, the body was in the studio, right? And I was auditioning for a show in Ottawa. And anyway, I flew to Ottawa and I was doing the show. And then but I got the show, by the way. And then I came back to Toronto. 2 days later, the program director from the radio station called me and said, this guy, and he mentioned his name, and he said, he's from TASS News Agency, and he wants to interview you. And then the program director jokingly said, well, he wasn't joking, but he laughed and said, and he's a spy too. And he laughed, ha, 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 ha. And I said, I don't want to know him. I'm not involved. Don't give him my name. And again, we're talking about the 70s, and it was very difficult to find somebody. We had phone books then.
I remember.
Right? Okay. So I just said, don't give him any information about me at all. I don't want to be involved. About a week later, or maybe two, I started getting calls from friends saying, we've been, I got this call from Sergeant so-and-so from the RCMP at Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and they're inquiring about you. And I was thinking, oh, shit, right? And I got like a bunch of people, it happened several times. And then one day I got a call, and the guy phoned, and he said, and he introduced himself, and he said he was Sergeant, and that he wanted to meet with me and to discuss a non-criminal matter. And I said, does it have anything to do with the guy in Ottawa? And he said, yes. And I said, I don't want to be involved. Please just leave me alone. I don't want to get involved in this. And he said, well, would you please just speak with us? This is something important, and you might be able to help your country. Okay, so shit, I'll do that.
Might as well, right?
Right. So I say, what do you want me to do? And he said, well, I want you to meet with the guy, and I want you to do a reading for him like he wants. And because I had got the show, I went there once a month. Well, I did that for 12 years. I went there once a month. I called the program director and said, okay, I'll see this guy, and I'm going to be staying. And the Mounties told me what hotel I'd be staying at, and I gave him I gave that information to the program director. Program director gave it to the Russian guy. Russian guy phoned me, and we booked the appointment. And on the day that I was to do his reading, the two Mounties, well, they were wearing suits, right? And they were like 6'3", 6'4". I'm 5'6", right? These guys were like giants. And
hey, me
anyway, yeah, okay. So anyway, they meet me at my place and they escort me to the airport. We don't go on commercial planes, and we flew on a government plane straight into Ottawa. We went then straight down to the hotel I was staying at. I didn't even check in. I already was. And when I got to my room, there were two adjoining rooms. And on both sides, we're doing 1970s technology. And both rooms were wired. And the room I was going to be in was wired. And they wanted me, and like this guy wanted a reading. And then, they explained to me what was going on. And this guy had spent his entire career in Washington, D.C. as a journalist for TASS, but he had a diplomatic passport. He was a spy. And he spent his whole career there. And this again was this was at the end of the Brezhnev era. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, this guy goes from being in Washington, D.C. to Ottawa. I assure you that is not a promotion. That is like a major league demotion. It really is. It's like going from the big leagues down to AAA or AA. That really is. So anyway, they thought, because Brezhnev was losing power at that time, and they thought that this guy, his people were losing power, and that's why he got transferred. And they believed that he wanted that he was afraid of going back to Russia and ending up in Siberia. And they felt that he was reaching out that way. They were wondering if he wanted to defect. So they wanted me to connect with that. That's why. So had the time all set up. And an hour or two before he arrived, they briefed me on this guy and his life, and it's the first and only time I've ever accepted any type of briefing when I'm doing readings. And then they said, and by the way, what we want you to do somewhere when you're doing the reading is say something like, sometimes things happen and we lose friends, but we always gain new ones, and you have friends. That was what I was supposed to say, or something similar to that, right?
Sure.
Okay. So as I was doing the reading for this guy using the information, to my horror, it turned out to be wrong. So I had to do a switch and do it for real. So I did a reading for him, and that made it a little bit difficult because my moral values kind of got involved. But anyway, I was doing the reading, and then I said what I was going to say to him. And he looked at me, stood up, turned around, walked out the door. The tape recorder was still on. He just got up, turned around, walked out the door. Didn't say hello, goodbye, nothing, gone. And anyway, the Mounties come in, and I said, geez, man, I really screwed it up. I'm so sorry. And they said, no, you didn't screw it up at all. Anytime somebody implies to defect around these guys, that's how they handle it. They get up and walk away. They just get away. So he did what they always do. And I said, oh, okay. And then he said, and we may never know what happens. Okay, now, so on the way back, the sergeant says to me, can you find things? And I said, well, maybe. What could I be finding? And he said, well, we look for dead letterboxes. And he said a dead letterbox is a place where they pass information.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called the dead letterbox. And in Niagara Falls, during the Cold War, more intelligence was passed across the American-Canadian border than anywhere in the world.
Interesting.
And our guys were spying on who was coming in, where they were dropping stuff, or they were trying to anyway. And the sergeant asked me, could I find dead letterboxes? I said, well, sure, maybe. Well, I was feeling pretty cocky after the thing with the guy. So every month for a couple of years, I went down to Niagara Falls and looked at the maps of the park in the area. And I would go over the maps and put my hand over the maps, and I would pick out the spots where I thought there would be dead letterboxes. And then we would go out into the field, into the park, and then we would find them, or I'd find them. And I did that for a couple of years. And
so there's certainly,
sorry, yeah.
I was going to say, so there's certainly, we can say that there's certainly validity to be found when you are brought into an organization like that. You said that you were sought out by them. You didn't, go out past a resume. I don't do that.
I don't do that. I don't get, and when I do that kind of stuff, I don't get paid either. So what did happen is these guys had a great, expense account, and after work, we had like a really big party, and they loaded me onto the bus the next morning, and I woke up in Toronto, So one time over that 2-year period, we were out walking in the park, and he said to me, your Russian friend? And I said, yeah. He said, it worked out good. That was it. I never knew anything else after that. That was it. I assumed that we got, I assumed what would have happened is that he would have, we would have picked him up and given safety, and then he would have gone to the American embassy, and you guys would have had him. Yeah, that's what would have happened. Yeah.
Well, it certainly seems like you had done your part in whatever they were expecting the outcome to be, whether it be A or B. You certainly were.
I think they got him.
Yeah. So that's amazing. And you know what? I really appreciate how articulate you are with, talking about these subjects at large. Unfortunately, we are at the end of our show for the evening, but
we just started. I
know. Doesn't it seem that way? I would love to have you back, Robert. I mean, I do have other questions we can get. Oh, thank you. I very much appreciate that. But seriously, I really enjoyed this discourse with you tonight. Absolutely fantastic. Even though we had a few technical issues in the beginning, I knew we would get on track somewhere here. And I'm so happy we did, because I've been looking forward to this interview since we first booked it. Obviously, I had to reschedule at one point, being stuck out, broken down, which I appreciate all of your kind words and thoughts and energy that you put into that.
You were, you were the guy that was going to interview me, but you were a human being that had contacted me that was stranded. And I didn't know your circumstances, but it didn't take a lot of energy, to reach out and say, hey, hope you're doing okay. It's going to be all right. Just, I'm here. And,
reassurance.
And that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And So thank you for letting me do that.
Oh, well, thank you for extending yourself in that way. It was very helpful and morale boosting at that moment to know that, you're sending that type of energy.
Thank you.
I'm going to take you off for the moment. I'm going to close out the show. But once again, Robert, thank you so much for everything that you've provided for us today. And of course, we'll be looking towards the work that you do, including your podcast. We'll be checking that out as well. Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate. We didn't get a chance to really dive deep into the whole idea of, working within a police force or, Secret Service. But I think Robert did a really good job at the end there, outlining, that whole motif that I sort of hope to encompass. Because if they're coming to you, well, they've heard of you, and there's a reason for that. And I think in my corner here, that is certain validity that, we can certainly present and say, yes, this is exactly what it looks like. This is what it is as it's described. And therefore, we have some grounding to stand on. Now, I did promise that I would reveal what this is and where it's from exactly. This, folks, is a piece of the Sage Radar Tower out in Camp Hero in Long Island. Now, there are pieces that you can find scattered. There's a handful of them out there that's sort of falling off of this thing as it's decaying, as you can well imagine. But this metal has certainly held a certain property from the minute that I picked it up. And I get all kinds of emotions and visual effects within my third eye when I hold this damn thing. Overall, it's not terribly pleasant, but it's not as if I took home a haunted doll or a rock from an extremely active paranormal location. And of course, being so close and involved in the way that I am with the Montauk Project, there's an intrinsic notion that it is our right to continue to explore this. And I hate to say it, I felt like this was a gift from that area. But again, it goes much deeper than that. Now, what I'm going to do is I have one extra piece of this, and I picked this up on purpose. I'm going to give this away on one of these shows here, just as a little reward for the one who is most interested in it. Now, I understand a lot of you follow that story, the Montauk Project, and what continues to roll out as we move forward. Obviously, I'm still working on the documentary, putting it together as we go forward here. I'll be working on it this evening. A lot of you can't get out to Long Island, and maybe it's because, Betty, double kick chick, somebody lives in Australia, or you guys from Germany or the UK, or even up in Canada, like Robert's from, and it's very difficult to get down here, but you have the interest. So I will be holding some sort of fun contest, the way that Rich Giordano does, from Goof On. We'll have a good time with that. That'll be coming up. So just keep your eyes open for that. I will send it out to you, and hopefully you'll make some good use of that in respect to a souvenir of sort. Okay. Because again, just because it's, this rusted piece of metal does not mean that it doesn't hold that energy. Keep in mind what that radar was used for during that time, and you'll know exactly what I mean when I say that. Let's see. Tomorrow I will be on a show, and to be honest with you, I'm chagrined. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I will post that correspondence as it comes in tomorrow. My host will certainly provide me with some promotional material, so keep your eye on the Dark Hour Paranormal Facebook group. I'll be posting it there, as well as Goof On, Black Lotus Productions, and a handful of others. You will be able to get right in and check that out. In the meantime, folks, I thank you very much for being here with me tonight. Thomas Kunas, thank you for your $4.99. No, they're euros, okay? They're euros. $4.99. Thank you very much, buddy. I appreciate that support. And everybody else that's been here tonight, I appreciate your encouragement. You all looked like you had a fantastic time writing many things in the chat that I was able to kind of catch out of the peripherals. Obviously, getting into what Robert was talking about in depth, relating some of your experiences, echoing what he was saying in a reflective sense. And I appreciate that support. All right. We will be back next week, if not sooner. I mean, it depends on how long it takes me to put this documentary together, but I'm spending time on this. This is much different than the last one, as I mentioned before. So keep your eyes out, and I will let you know as we move forward what that's going to look like. Once again, for now, stay explorative, continue to research this nebulous field that we're all a part of in search of the truth, and I guarantee you, as we are in this together, one day we will come together on a consensus. And sure enough, that will be our manifested reality. Ciao.